Hello again, Struckweb. Today I'm bringing you another build video for Wolcen Words of Mayhem, and this is a 2.0 version of a previous build of mine, kind of slight rework after the build, got some things fixed on the passive tree which I implemented, and also some things got kind of nerfed. So this is Havoc Golemancer 2.0, which is a rework of my Immortal Golemancer, Immortal Havoc Golemancer build. So hope you enjoy it. It can be played again as the previous version with 1 golem, 2 golems or 3 golems, based on how much of that survivability you need. I personally played this with a single golem. I'm a bit squishier that way, and I might die when I'm not paying attention and I don't move out, away from danger. But if you wanna go safer, you can always just duplicate the golem skill, use it a second time, duplicate the duplicate, and maybe use it a third time if you want to. So the build is relying on Mark of Impurity for those explosions, and if you don't have a trial belt, you might need Mark of Impurity on your skill bar, and it's all about using Anomaly to cluster up the enemies, using something like, for example, PlagueBurst to increase the number of globes, and then Anomaly would suck the enemies in, it would suck the globes in and make those globes explode, and eventually when the enemies get executed after they're under 15% HP from use from the Pie Striker, then they explode, they do a lot of damage to the other nearby enemies, and there's like a chain reaction that follows. So it's flexible, you can replace a lot of the skills, and I'm using, as you can see, the salvo of 5 rockets as Havoc Corp to do damage, but you might want to use Bleeding Edge, you might want to use Anvil Slow, you might want to use Gunslinger's Brand, any skill you prefer. So it is pretty flexible, and you can see we are clustering them up, we are using that chain reaction to do damage, and eventually it's pretty nice. It's not entirely meta build, and I don't recommend doing 187 maps. I mean, I do 187 maps every now and then, but it's better to farm 163 because 163 items are cheaper to upgrade and they have the same amount of stats. So let's show you more information. Stats for this build are kind of, as you can see, a little bit of toughness and then the rest into ferocity. I'm gonna quickly reset it just to show you kind of how much I've invested into each. So let's get this to 632 again, just to see how much. So I've invested 300 here, as you can see, and the rest I dumped into ferocity. As you saw, I had 800 something there. So 632 is what I had here. Of course, this is just optional. Invest this until you think you've got enough, and then the rest would be kind of sorted. I think a little bit more toughness to sacrifice ferocity won't be a bad choice if you have more ferocity from items, because this build got nerfed, and from 59,000 HP now I have 31,000 HP, so keep that in mind. A little bit more toughness wouldn't hurt anyone. So that's it for the stats. Now let's move on to the other segment. So when it comes to skills, this build is kind of flexible in this regard. There are some skills I really don't change, like of course the golem for survivability with generational grief. So this is the must-have node. As for whether you want to be using the whitening, the toxic, or the shadow damage pet, it's up to you. I like using the whitening because well, I don't have that much whitening damage from gear, so he might be a little bit of help with proccing Immortal offering with whitening damage, and also he's ranged, so that's nice. I like increasing his attack speed, so there's a higher chance of proccing applying shock elements. And then I also like increasing the summon's ailment chance score. You might wanna change those, or you might wanna even remove this, up to you, but make sure to get Generational Grief. This is a huge source of damage reduction for you. Now, Anomaly. There are some things you might wanna replace, but in general you want the Vortex pulse enemies multiple times preferably, just to keep the enemies in there. You want health globes pulled into the Vortex explode, dealing damage in an area of effect. And the rest is up to you. I like using skill duration, I like even having some crit damage as well, and I like increases the skill's area of effect. Things I could suggest is also ailment chance score. If you want, you can remove the crit damage, you can remove the ailment chance score and pick something else that you like. It's up to you. There's also an option to have two vortexes active simultaneously. That's not a bad idea either. Up to you guys how you wanna do it. Now here's the synergy. This pulls health globes, and this is why I suggest using PlagueBurst. Whether it's poison or fire would depend on your gear, and I'm gonna talk more about that later. But basically I'm using fire because I don't have fire as much in my gear as I do toxic. So I can cause toxic through my gear, but I am lacking kind of things that give me fire damage. I do have some, but not as much, so that's why I decided to go for fire. And here's the synergy here. Explosions have a chance to drop health globes, decreases the damage dealt with this skill. This synergizes with that, and we have more health globes, more explosions, more AoE, so pretty nice. Another thing you might wanna get this one, and you might wanna get this one. I do suggest getting this and this. The rest is up to you, whether you want to use fire or toxic version, whether you want to use another skill such as solar fall. It's entirely up to you. This is completely replaceable and it's super flexible. So here comes the thing that I like using, and it is Aether Jump. I think this is entirely up to you what you would like for Aether Jump, what modifiers you would prefer. I like using increased range, I like decreasing the cooldown, I like this one to be able to apply stasis, but that's completely optional. You might want to do a decoy or anything else you like. Even this one is amazing. This one is actually pretty nice and would synergize well with the build. So just pick whatever you like and make sure to keep experimenting. If you don't like a certain setup of Aether Jump, just switch it out. This is what I'm using. Now, as I said, it's flexible, and since I'm using Havoc and since I'm using a dagger, I can afford using Sovereign Shout. If you're not using a dagger and you're using a pistol, you're not gonna be able to use Sovereign Shout. I like using Sovereign Shout because the way I've configured it, I get 20% attack speed, not attack speed score, but attack speed. Then I get up to 15% over resistance score per enemy, which is up to 10 stacks, so up to 150% over resistance score if I use the shout and there's 10 enemies nearby. I also get block chance, I get movement speed, health globe generation. So this is the modifiers that you're seeing on the side over here. This increases the duration of all the buffs. I mean, you can take something else like the regeneration on hit, but I don't need it that much. Regeneration on hit would be nice if you're not using Havoc, but for example Anvil's Woe and you want that one. So this is increasing the effectiveness. You can see how each of those buffs gets better. Strongly recommend using this node. And the movement speed, you might want to get rid of it if you're more mobile with Aether Jump. You could take some more White Leech. It's entirely up to you. Now, this brings us to Havoc Orb. This is what I like using. and you can replace it for any damage skill, but that would require some reworking on the passives and actives, which in the skills and in the Gates of Fate segments I will mention if you're using different skills how you might want to rework those, but keep that in mind. It's super flexible. You could use it with Anvil's Woe, Bleeding Edge, you could use it with Gunslinger's Brand, anything you like. Of course I prefer using Havoc, and this is how I use my Havoc. I use Havoc to cause bleeding because, well, I don't have as much rend damage in my items, that's why I decided to make it bleed. I like the Salvo, Baptism by Hell, which launches multiple, which is 5 projectiles in a quick succession, reducing the damage of the projectile, but it's 5 projectiles, so it's pretty nice. Then this one increases the damage and it becomes a rocket. Pretty decent, which negates half of the Wasp here, so we're only losing 100% damage when we combine this and this. And then another 45%, that means we're losing only 55% damage, and with this 45 it means we're only losing 10% damage. So altogether only 10% damage is lost, and we've got Ailment Chance Score, which I like using. You might wanna reduce it, it's up to you. It's like only 3%, so that's not that much, but I really like it, so hope you like using it too. Just experiment. If you want you can remove this, but I strongly suggest using the other nodes. So this one is probably the only one that you can kind of switch around, like maybe get more crit damage. It's not gonna be that bad. So that's it for the skills. I'm gonna quickly mention about the apocalyptic forms to just use whatever apocalyptic form you want. Beat fire, beat the other ones. I don't think it matters. They're not gonna help you much in the late end game. Maybe early on they would help, because early on they could do some damage, and there is probably still some glitch where people can do shit tons of damage with the burning one, stacking those burn stacks, but just pick whatever you like. It's mostly gonna be probably used just to give you a little bit of extra few seconds of survivability, and that's kind of it. Now let's move on to the Gates of Fate section. So on the Gates of Fate section you're seeing kind of what I've got right now at level 82. Let's say level 70. You're at level 70, that means you're removing 1 point here, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 10 points you can remove. So that's gonna be for level 72. 10 levels under this, that's gonna be the setup. So removing this and those points and those points. First let's talk about why we've taken which node. This node we take because, well, this gives us extra survivability, but it decreases our HP. They nerfed it super badly, and now from 59,000 HP I end up having 31,000 HP, and that's probably because the developers don't want their players to have fun when playing their game. They've proven that many times throughout the patches, when they're focusing on nerfing things rather than buffing the weak stuff to be on par with the strong stuff. I didn't think this needed a nerf, but well, the developers thought so. So that's one source of survivability. Another source of survivability for us is this thing here, Dire Juncture. And now more survivability comes from elevated gains and salvatory anchor. This doubles the resistance on our helmet and chest piece, which gives us a watt if we have good items. So then we move on to what gives us double damage. This has a chance to give us double damage when we have over 750 rage. And you can try and keep it up, but whenever you have it, be grateful to have that damage. I'm not trying most of the time to keep my rage over that, but eventually every now and then it is. And this is another source of extra 100% damage. so pretty decent. And now we are moving on to one of the biggest sources of damage for the build, which is Immortal Offering. Take this on the way, and then grab this on the way. A little bit of resistance won't hurt, and now this here gives us up to 7 different buffs, each of them giving us 25% damage when maxing out all 5 stacks. Another source of utility or damage, or I'm not sure how to describe it, but to be able to explode enemies when they have 15% HP left and you do sacred damage to them. So when the enemies reach 15% or less HP left, even champions, they explode as soon as you do sacred damage. So you might want to have sacred damage to attacks or sacred damage to spells. Something of that is needed, whether it's attack or spell damage. As long as you have some sacred damage to do, then you can trigger this. This is just a little bit of extra willpower and rage. I strongly recommend having it, and eventually I would also prefer to get those 2 nodes here if I have some more points to spare. Another thing that's good would be this one, but that's a lot of more points needed, but it would be nice for the cost reduction and cost decrease. In fact, if you're playing a bleeding catch or what's it called, Anvil Swow build, where you might need a bit more rage generation, you would be sacrificing this, and then you would probably do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That would really help. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points you can remove. With those 9 points, I strongly recommend getting those 2. And getting this one with those 2, and eventually maybe getting that one too. That's just if you're using Anvil Swow and Bleeding Catch instead of Havoc, or on anything else that uses more rage, like Wrath of Buffet, which is kind of still weak. So what did we skip talking about? This one applies weakness when blocking an attack. This should help you with EOS, but I still haven't confirmed whether applying weakness would trigger that, or whether you really need to be doing sacred damage. This gives us some block chance, this gives us some block efficiency, there's some more block efficiency here and here. And this is a lot of crit damage. We're losing some damage, but we're getting some crit chance score on the way. This gives us some crit chance score and attack speed, and speaking of attack speed, this is amazing. This is 150% attack speed score. It also gives us some wife speech, but it decreases our resistances by 50%, all resistance score. Not all resistance, but all resistance score. And then this gives us another 50% attack speed score and some more wife leech, 0.5. So overall we're getting 1.5 wife leech from this, and 200% attack speed score for the price of 50% all resistance score, which you're getting back from different nodes like that one and that one. So we're getting back those resistances for sure. Then here for some crit chance score and crit damage, here for some crit damage and globe generation, and you saw why we need the globe generation. And I think we've kind of gone through everything there is to go through. Even gave you some alternative choices. So hope this helps you. Now let's move on to the next segment, where we're gonna talk about the gear that I'm suggesting and the roles in the items you might need. Which I strongly recommend having it, and eventually I would also prefer to get those 2 nodes here if I have some more points to spare. Another thing that's good would be this one, but that's a lot of more points needed, but it would be nice for the cost reduction and cost decrease. In fact, if you're playing a bleeding catch or or what's it called, the Anvil Swow build, where you might need a bit more rage generation, you would be sacrificing this, and then you would probably do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That would really help. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points you can remove. With those 9 points, I strongly recommend getting those two, and getting this one with those two, and eventually maybe getting that one too. That's just if you're using Anvil Swow and Bleeding Catch instead of, or Bleeding Catch instead of Havoc, or upon anything else that uses more rage, like Wrath of Buffet, which is kind of still weak. So what did we skip talking about? This one applies weakness when blocking an attack. This should help you with EOS, but I still haven't confirmed whether applying weakness would trigger that, or whether you really need to be doing sacred damage. This gives us some block chance, this gives us some block efficiency, there's some more block efficiency here and here. And this is a lot of crit damage. We're losing some damage, but we're getting some crit chance score on the way. This gives us some crit chance score and attack speed, and speaking of attack speed, this is amazing. This is 150% attack speed score. It also gives us some wife speech, but it decreases our resistances by 50%, all resistance score. Not all resistance, but all resistance score. And then this gives us another 50% attack speed score and some more wife leech, 0.5. So overall we're getting 1.5 wife leech from this, and 200% attack speed score for the price of 50% all resistance score, which you're getting back from different nodes like that one and that one. So we're getting back those resistances for sure. Then here for some crit chance score and crit damage, here for some crit damage and globe generation, and you saw why we need the globe generation. And I think we've kind of gone through everything there is to go through. Even gave you some alternative choices. So hope this helps you. Now let's move on to the next segment, where we're gonna talk about the gear that I'm suggesting and the roles in the items you might need. Here we are at the gear segment, and there are a few things I'd like to mention. First of all, you need heavy helmet and heavy chest piece with as much all resistance score as you can get. Preferably things like transfer time decrease or resource generation would help, toughness and ferocity would help, damage or material damage or any other source of damage that you do would be nice as well. Cooldown decrease is amazing, and I would strongly suggest having cooldown at least on one piece. So it may not be those two if you can get one, but at least try to get pants with cooldown decrease. You can see I've got on the helmet 33% and here 36. If I had some more cooldown decrease on the chest piece, it would have been amazing. So ideally you would have on all three pieces, but focus on the resistances on those two pieces. The biggest priority would be to get the resistances as high as you can on those. Now for the arms, shoulders, boots and pants, the best equipment you can get would be something like this, that gives you a bruiser piece with a shit tons of HP and shit tons of resistances. So something like this, 414 resistance score on a bruiser piece is amazing. Yeah, of course you can get even more if you're lucky. And on this one, ideally instead of agility, I would have something like between 90 and 100% HP on this item, which would make the HP around 2,500, something like that. And that would be the ideal row. You do want rage and willpower cost decrease here. So all resistance flat, all resistance percent, HP flat, HP percent, resistance, not resistance but rage and willpower cost decrease. and then whatever else like damage or maybe some ferocity or some toughness. So here the health regeneration and agility are what I would replace. You can see on this one I don't have as much resistance because I don't have the percent one, but I still like it because it's still a lot of flat resistance and HP. So you can see similar to this one here, I don't have the percent ones on HP and resistance, but I still use it because resource generation, then damage, then rage and willpower cost decrease, and also toughness. It does help. And I don't have another one of those, I'm using one of those. 99% resistance score, 194 flat, pretty solid. Ferocity, rage and willpower cost decrease. The rest are kind of so-so, but so basically you want something similar here, but here you want to also get cooldown decrease. So if you don't have a good bruiser, get good heavy. You're not gonna get as much HP without bruiser pieces. So that means you might want to invest more points into toughness, less into ferocity, depending what your gear gives you. And you see, even in the boots I did the same. On the boots you can get movement speed, so I would suggest try to get something with a shit ton of resistances, and if it's a bruiser piece, shit tons of HP, but also some movement speed won't hurt you. It's not a must have because we have a lot of mobility with Aether Jump though. Now, this brings us to the catalyst. We do need a catalyst to be able to use the golem and anomaly and Aether Jump, so to be able to use spells. You could go ahead and try and get a shield that gives you Aether Jump and maybe a weapon that gives you Livor Mortis, and not use anomaly and PlagueBurst, but it's not gonna work. I mean, alternatively you can not use Aether Jump and maybe get something that gives you access to Anomaly and something that gives you access to Livor Mortis, and then replace Aether Jump with what's its name, that skill, I keep forgetting, Warpath. So you could try using Warpath there, and instead of PlagueBurst you can use something else that's not a spell, but you would have to do a lot of not anointed but untainted enemies there. So keep that in mind. So for the weapon, a dagger would be ideal if you want to be using Sovereign Shout. If you're not using Sovereign Shout, you can use some sort of a pistol. But keep in mind, in your gear you would want gems that give you block efficiency and block chance. And here the transfer time decrease, I only put it because it's super hard to get 3 times block chance or 2 times block chance and 1 time block efficiency on a catalyst. So I kind of ran out of money when I was rolling for this and just settled down for this one. I'm happy with just having transfer time on this and this, and ideally you would have a lot of flat damage to spells, some wife leech from some sort of spells, and maybe some other good stuff like casting speed or more wife leech or whatever else you can get. Now for the weapon you would want 3 times of flat damage, and on this one I've got physical, rend and toxic. On this one I don't have 3 times flat, but I have fire, frost, which are elemental, and then I've got percent elemental damage, so that also works. So if you can get 2 times flat, maybe try to get, if you can't get 3 times flat, get 2 times flat and then a percent that matches those flats. So if it's physical, rend and or toxic, then you want material. If it's fire, frost or lightning, you want elemental. If it's sacred, shadow or aether, you want occult damage percent. Things that you want to be looking out for as well is crit chance score, crit damage and or attack speed score. It won't be bad to have such stats. Wife leech is also great, so that also would help. And here is something that is super important. You want to have 7 different types of ailment buffs from Immortal offering. So you want rend for bleeding, toxic for poison, you want fire for burning, you want lightning for shock, you want sacred for weakness, you want shadow for curse and you want Aether for stasis. So everything except physical and fire you want to be doing as damage to spells or damage to attacks. And if you're missing some of those, you would really want to get them from the spells. So this spell gives you stasis. This spell can give you either poison or burn. I'm using burn because, as you can see, this one gives me toxic, so from this item I can get toxic on my spells without a problem. This one can give me frost and whitening. The whitening kit doesn't seem to be enough because it's just a single row. That's why I was using the whitening pet. Ideally I would have some more whitening instead of this much frost. And this can give me fire damage to spells, sacred damage to spells, and shadow damage to spells. This can give me some more physical to attacks. I would prefer more whitening, but unfortunately I don't have as much. If I were to change and stop using Sovereign Shout and use this pistol, this means I can change this from a fire to toxic spell, because I would be doing plenty of fire from my weapon and I wouldn't have as much toxic though, so that would mean I would need more toxic. And yeah, just keep that in mind, use that flexibility. This is what I was talking about in the skills segment when discussing this. Ideally for the rings you would have a steel ring that gives you a high crit damage, and then at the bottom you would have some more crit damage, and then you would have some things like extra flat damage to attacks or flat damage to spells. Ideally to attacks though, because you're gonna have a lot of damage from Havoc, and then some sort of a buff like elemental damage or shadow, or a cold damage or material damage would really help. All resistance score also would really help. Things like +1 piercing to all projectiles, you can only get that by using Genesis stones and crafting, or by doing untainted runs, which is you're gonna see how to do untainted. Basically you're picking a map like 163 or 187, and I strongly suggest picking 163 because 187 items are not better than 163. In fact they are worse because they don't give you more stats, but they cost more to upgrade. So upgrading on 163 item is much cheaper than 187, but they also give you the same amount of stats. So 187 would not give more than 163. So you start rolling. You just pick 4 modifiers. You can pick 5 like I did, but you don't need to. You can pick 4 modifiers, and this unlocks this War Untainted 4000 affinity. So you select this, and this was the Untainted, and it changes the map to a completely different one. And there you can get certain drops that you can only get there, such as Aether Jump or other skills on weapons and offhands, such as rings with pierce to all projectiles or amulets, or things that give you +X ailment stacks inflicted, and so on. Ideally you would be using the trial belt, but if you don't have the trial belt, you need to sacrifice one of the skills to use Mark of Impurity, because one of the main sources of damage is this thing, Fate of the Unholy. Marked enemies cause an explosion in an area of effect around them when they are killed. This is one of the biggest sources of damage for the build. So if you don't have the trial belt, use Mark of Impurity manually, and this is how I suggest building it. Damage received by marked enemies is increased further, even further, then chance to inflict ailments on those enemies, and then marked enemies are inflicted with numerous curse stacks, which basically makes them take more damage for each stack. So this is super important to have, and you don't need that to be higher than level 59. So before you get that to level 59, keep it in your bar. If you're using the trial belt, it doesn't need to be on your skill bar past level 59, because past level 59 you would have unlocked all the modifier points, and it's not gonna get any much stronger. You're just getting 0.5 rage generation per level. Whether you want that or not, It's up to you. I suggest after level 59 remove it from the skill bar if you have a trial belt. If you don't, keep it and use it all the time. So another thing I want to mention is that you might want to be using multiple golems. If you're having trouble surviving, you might want to use a second golem or even a third golem, which is done by duplicating the skills at this enemy. You can take a certain skill like this one and then you can try and duplicate it, and you can only have 2 duplicated skills. So you can either duplicate 2 different skills, or you can duplicate one skill twice, like I did with the golems. So you duplicate the original skill like this, and it appears here. Then you duplicate the duplicate, and then you get the second one. That's how you get 2 duplicates of the same skill. So you can use 3 golems, and that's gonna give you much more survivability. But yeah, that's just optional. So I think that kind of is it for the gear. I did go into a lot of detail about certain things. For the amulet you want the exact same thing as the rings. I did forget to mention that. Ideally you would want a base with plus 18 to all attributes. But yeah, try to get steel rings here. And whether it's a dagger or a pistol, you just might have to rework your skills. And if you don't have a trial belt, you might want something that gives you a lot of flat damage to attacks or spells. Maybe piercing, maybe ailment stacks inflicted, maybe some HP would be nice, crit damage would be amazing, crit chance score would be nice, some damage percent also won't be bad. In general, all the things I mentioned for the other items can apply for the belt as well. Of course, flat damage should be prioritized. So enough of that, let's show you some more gameplay to top things off. So here is me playing a little bit more of the build, and as I said at the start of the video, it's all about clustering up the enemies with Anomaly and then following up with some attack skills to get their HP down, to get them to proc explosions, to get those health bulbs to spawn. So I do Anomaly, immediately after that I do PlagueBurst, and then I start with Havoc Orb. So of course don't forget to use the shout for attack speed when you can, or when you need rage. I personally use it when I want to regain rage, but sometimes I use it solely for the buff instead of waiting for my rage to go down. I mean, I'm not the best at keeping my rage up, because you can see I've got my potions ready, I'm not using them, and if you're a good player you would be constantly using your rage potion or your willpower potion when it's needed, and you would try to keep your H above 750 to keep that extra double damage available, and to make sure it's proccing. So I may not be the best at controlling the build, but it doesn't mean that the build won't do you any good. So I hope you enjoy it, I hope you like it. If you rework it in some way, let me know what type of skills and passives you have taken and what type of items you're using. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section, and let me know what you've done to make this build your own. So if you need help, hints, tips how to play this build or any of my other builds, or any build in general on any character, feel free to hop over to my Twitch or YouTube channel. You can live chat with me, you can leave me a comment and I can reply to that comment when I'm available. You can also find me on my Discord server, link in the description for that, and you can always chat with me over there if you need some help with anything. If you enjoyed this video, you could subscribe to my channel to get notified for more content updates for games like Chaosbane, Torchlight 3, Wolcen Words of Mayhem, or other similar isometric footers, or as well sometimes for Borderlands 3 content. Thanks for watching the video, folks. Keep it cool. Until next time, and goodbye.